Great feedback, everyone. Let's move on to the next question. Anyone have a follow-up question to that? We've got one over here.
Max Payne with Inline Electric. My question derives from more that issue that I'm seeing in our company where you have people that may be a great counter guy or a great inside guy, but they may not be fit for that next position that they want. How do you have that conversation where you go, we think you're just good at what you're doing, we may not think you're great for that next step?
I think what works for me is to forget about the individual and look at the position and the next position. And we have a new VP of HR who has given me a great tool. It's called the Role Success Map. So you define the job, you list the competencies, you look at the functional knowledge and the experience required. And you document that. And if you sit down with people and show, where they're at and where they need to be, they're going to reach that conclusion on their own generally. That has helped me. Others?
Yeah, I think as you identify those individuals, part of it too is giving them a shot. You may not think so, and there's been times that, I've been wrong where I would have looked and said, you know what, I don't think they can do it, when given the opportunities, the training, the development, or at least the exposure to what they need. So I think giving them the opportunity, more times than not, you'll both lead down the right path. It's when they say it and you shut the door. Even if you're right, even if you really had it, at the end of the day, that's what's going to kill it. But trying to work with them, most times you'll come to the same conclusion when you give them the opportunity and give them the exposure. And if it's standing in front of a crowd, if it's whatever they have to do, if they're not comfortable with it, they'll come to that conclusion with you.
And maybe they might not be ready for that next opportunity, but to keep them motivated and engaged, maybe you can have them work on some special events or projects or give them something else to keep them motivated and engaged.
Great input.
The only thing I was going to add to that, and maybe it's a step off that question, but I really believe that, there's only a few leaders that I've met over the years that just really are that 1% range, that 5% range, kind of like the star athletes that, they were just given all those gifts. And they're going to succeed just because those gifts were there, those God-given talents. A lot of the rest of it is commitment. I mean, if you're really committed. So if that person, if you see that they've achieved everything they can within that role, I love your idea of either giving them something new or letting them try a different role, the next challenge, most likely they're going to succeed at whatever you give them, because most of the time it isn't ability, it's commitment to the position you're in that makes you a star.
That's interesting. I'm going to see if you guys can give me a one-word answer. What's the strongest characteristic or trait you look at when hiring someone? Steve, one word.
People that have tried new things.
It has to be two words. It would be energy and creativity.
Okay, I'll accept that.
3 words: ability, aspiration, engagement.
For the one word, I'd say passion.
Passion, I like that. Does anyone have any hiring-related questions or anything like that you want to touch on while we're on this topic?
Steve, I'll fill the time here a little bit. Steve talked about leadership, and I don't know if anyone has read John Maxwell's works about the 5 levels of leadership. I think that's kind of interesting to look at, and we're at different levels depending on where we're at in our careers and who we're working with. And the first level is looking at people follow you because you have a title. And then they follow you because they like you. And then they follow you because they like what you're doing for the organization, and then what you're doing for them. And then the level 5 leadership is because they really respect you and acknowledge what you've accomplished. So you will be at different points in that leadership level scale, at different points in your career, and at different points or with different activities too. In your job, you're probably at one level. At home, you might be at a different level. I know I'm at a very different level at home than I am at work. If you're volunteering in the community, if you're doing something with your children, you'll be at all of those different levels. But it is kind of fun to study that, and sometimes we think we'll be at the top of that level right away, but it's not realistic as a new young leader.
I have a question. Scott, with TED Magazine. You won't be quoted on this, so don't worry about what your answers are. But I believe that culture wins the day. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I want to work at a company where everybody else wants to work there. Or I want to work in a department or a branch or a division or whatever, where everybody else wants to work. But I also believe that you don't get hit with the lucky stick when it comes to culture by, oh, I just hired the right people and they're the right culture. I think culture comes from the top. I think it comes from leadership. So to the people who are already maybe managers or leading or about to be leading somewhere down the road, how do you lead culture from the top?
This is a whole one-day seminar.
Well, you know, when I think about the team that I work with today, it's not a very large team, but they have responsibility for a very significant amount of business. And I think I related last night to what Larry talked about within their organization. It's very important that everybody have passion, you know, that they want to fulfill the targets that are set. We want to grow our business together. But for me, I felt like a big element that was missing was fun. You know, you have to be able to want to stay with us and to work together. And, you know, so we started to implement just some very small things within our team so that we can have some fun together. And it's not my ideas. I put every team member in charge to come up with some activities that we can do. So, you know, there's a lot of seriousness involved, but I think in terms of culture and in terms of being passionate about loving where you work, because what you do, you can do in many places. A big piece of it is that cultural piece and wanting to be part of the team, the company, and I think as leaders, it's up to us to find ways to develop that and initiate it.
I'll add a few things to that. Certainly fun is a big part of it, and I know Larry mentioned that yesterday too. But at a little higher level, I think having a clear vision and articulating that so everyone knows how they fit into that vision, how they can support it and be a part of it. I think everyone wants to be a part of something bigger. So if you can articulate that vision and make it meaningful for every employee, it's important. I think transparency is important. You need to let people know what's going on, communicate regularly, consistently, good news and bad news, so there isn't a surprise. And I think having clear levels of authority and empowerment so people can do their jobs, let them know what they can do and to what level before they need to get approval. And having those clear levels of authority is very empowering. And then I think the last piece is, maybe not the last, but the last for me, so others can speak, having clear rewards. And some of the rewards is having fun. Rewards might be financial, it might be recognition, but certainly take time to celebrate the wins, have some rewards and some recognition.
Yeah. Culture for me is something, I wish I would have came to this meeting about 10 years ago, because I missed how important culture was in our company. There was about a 10-year span as we were growing and acquiring companies and putting things together that we weren't thinking about culture. We were thinking about integration, and we didn't spend time thinking about culture. And then I think Larry and I were at the same meeting with Square D when it got mentioned that culture eats strategy for breakfast. We kept working on strategy, and culture kept just gobbling it up and not letting the strategy happen. So we had to back up and say, wait a minute here. And going back to Tammy's point, I think it starts in that boardroom and giving that vision so everybody can follow that. But it's understanding that there is a culture and that you're creating a culture. And then that cascades down throughout the organization. That's one thing that we're looking to do, is that empowerment side that Tammy was talking about. You create a culture in your branch. And you know, you're a leader, even if you're not a branch manager or you're not a department supervisor, you're still a leader, or you wouldn't be here. So you're leading maybe an inside sales team, an outside sales team. You can help create the culture there and bring that culture up through. If it's trying to create a fun environment or a rewarding environment or a growth-oriented environment, that can be led by the people in this room. So thank you. Great question, Scott.
And I just real quick on that, I think the other piece, particularly on the fun side of culture or that environment that gets people excited, you can't fake it. You can't just talk about it in a room and then go out and do it. It has to be not only from the management, the position you're in, but the people you surround yourself with. You may not always be able to change at levels or affect that. But as you do, those decisions are having the right people around. Because if it's not organic, if it's not truly genuine, I mean, you've all probably been around somebody who's trying really hard, and you can see it in a second. So just keep it as genuine as possible, and it's got to be real to who you are and the environment that you're trying to build around you.
My name is Greg Wells. I'm with Interstate Electric in Columbus, Georgia. My question is, this is the LEAD Summit. Obviously, we're talking about the 30 under 35, the up and comings, which we have in our organization. But I've been with the organization 26 years. We're new to NAED probably the last 3 years. But I've been there 26 years, but we've got guys that have been there a lot longer than I have. What do you do to keep those guys that are older but yet bring value, to keep them motivated, keep them going, because they're the new technology, they're not quite in it, but what are you doing for your people that are older but yet can bring value but keep them driven within your organization?
For us, we kind of joked, there was a phrase once that we used to use, was the odds are, and odds are you have no idea what your customer or your employee is thinking or truly what's driving them. But I think it's really understanding what matters to them, because what matters to somebody who's 26 and 66 is very different. So I think as you're, in some management, there are things that you have to be cookie cutter with that have to be consistent. But when it comes dealing with people, there's a lot of times you just have to understand what makes them tick. And regardless of age, it's different. So it doesn't matter. All 30-year-olds and all 60-year-olds don't even value the same thing. So I think it just comes down to when dealing with, or at least for us, when dealing with multi-generational, is just understanding what matters to them, what makes them tick, and keeping that value there. Don't force things if you can control it. I mean, some change in business has to happen, but if you can control and you can adapt, that to us is how we've, tried to overcome it the best we can.
The other thing that came to mind when you were talking about that also.
We're all probably resembling that remark, so.
Yes, we are.
We're motivated, I think.
Yes, we are. But I also think it's a really good opportunity to do some cross-mentoring. So, where you've got someone who's a baby boomer and maybe is a little, has discomforts in certain areas, and you have a younger person who maybe doesn't have the wealth of experience and knowledge. And I think if you team people together and they can help each other, learn technology. I mean, I think of one individual in our organization who, sat at a meeting and watched a younger person go through a little presentation, but she got it on his phone. She sent it to him on his phone, and he sat there like this. And he said, "How did you do that?" So she taught him something that he was able to do afterwards. So I think just, the cross-mentoring, if you will, I think works really well.
Nick Hurling from Connection. I'm going to use a little bit of a buzzword that everybody probably in here can relate to, of a millennial. I want to know how you guys combat millennial lateral jumps, whether it be inside your company or outside of your company. It seems like our generation typically jumps to a different company just because it's $5,000 more of pay, but it's the same position. So what are ways that you guys combat that common theme?
That was going to be our question for you, actually, but I don't know if there is a right answer. I think one thing that we're trying to do at 3E is we added a position to what I call our corporate board, but it's not our board of directors, but our internal management board. We added an employee development position, and kind of going off some of the things that Allison and the group was talking about up here, because there are people at one time in our industry that worked for 10 years in the warehouse and they finally got their shot at the counter, and then they worked for 5 or 6 years there and they finally got their shot at inside, and 20 years later they're an outside salesperson. Now, as we know, most people expect that transition to happen in about 2 years. And it can go too fast. So part of it's mentoring them and coaching them, spending time with them, saying, you can get out there too early and you only have one chance to make a good first impression or to make a first impression, so you want it to be good. But I think it's just looking for ways to make them feel like they're moving forward even when their position hasn't changed. So that's development, employee development, whether that be product training or skills training, and then going back to some of the things that they talked about up here before. Get on a committee at work. Okay, we're trying to form a committee to boost morale and look at ways to either have fun or recognize people for jobs well done. So keep them engaged. But it comes back to me, the real basic thing is employee interaction and spending time with them, having the supervisor spend time with them, having the local management team spend time with those people and show them that they are being looked at as a career path and not just a position.